Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
So more on our top story now, and Theresa May has called the UK's Brexit plan a practical and workable solution. Well, let's talk now to the editor of Unionist Voice and grassroots campaigner for Leave in Northern Ireland, Jamie Bryson, who is in Belfast. Jamie, your reaction to the Prime Minister's speech. There was a lot of mention of the word union and the importance of union in it.
Well, I'm somewhat shocked at how surprised the people are that the Prime Minister has dismissed the backstop here today in Belfast, because I think if we go back to December, almost instantly the Prime Minister made clear that the European Union's interpretation of the backstop is not something that any British Prime Minister could have a countenance. So I don't think the backstop in the terms that the European Union was putting forward was ever going to fly, and it certainly would have been a constitutional absurdity to effectively subsume Northern Ireland into an economic United Ireland and cut it off from the UK's internal market. So I'm surprised in a sense that it's getting the coverage that it is, because I think the Prime Minister is only reiterating what is, for a start, a basic legal fact. It would be in breach of the 1998 Act in terms of the principle of consent in Northern Ireland to effectively create a third country, I think is how the Prime Minister put it. So in one sense, I'm surprised that people are so shocked that she's reiterating this position. But as a unionist, I'm very pleased with what the Prime Minister has said. But also, I would like to see her being a lot more firmer on the overall deadlines in relation to Brexit, such as we must leave the customs union, we must leave the single market, and we must be entirely outside the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice.
But let's just come back to the border issue in particular. I mean, the EU position and the Prime Minister's position are just fundamentally irreconcilable, aren't they? I mean, what do you think about the chances of no-deal Brexit from here?
That would be my view, is exactly where we're heading to at this point in time. And let me say, and I have to say, I'm in a minority within the unionist community to make this argument, but I have said from the start of Brexit that the spirit, as it were, of the Belfast Agreement, which is built on this notion of all-Ireland harmonisation within the context of the European Union, cannot be reconciled with Brexit, because we will now have a land border, a customs border between the sovereign United Kingdom and the Republic of Ireland, who will be part of the European Union. So I think it does signal the end of the Belfast Agreement somewhat, well, certainly the spirit of the Belfast Agreement, even though it is naturally the terms that's within the 1998 Act that the Prime Minister is referring to today when she says a border in the Irish Sea would be in breach of that. But, I have to say, I've heard the nationalism and I've heard the Irish government repeatedly make the case that special status for Northern Ireland would be fantastic. It would give Northern Ireland preferential treatment. And if it's so fantastic, I'm confused as to why the Republic of Ireland government isn't making the argument to the European Union for the Republic of Ireland to have special status, which would give them equal access to the UK's internal market and the European Union. So I think maybe that's something that the Irish government could look at. If they want special status, why not let's have special status to the Republic of Ireland?
OK, all right. I'm afraid we need to cut it a little bit short there. Jamie Bryson, good to get your analysis. I'm going to take you to Brussels now, where we're expecting to hear from Chief Negotiator Michel Barnier.
Relationship. It shows that also from the British side, a close relationship is of importance. We are now getting into a serious phase of negotiations. We discussed and we agreed that more efforts are needed so that the withdrawal agreement can be concluded as soon as possible. Work must also be accelerated with a view to preparing a political declaration on the framework for the future relationship. And the EU's work on preparedness has to be stepped up. It was a unanimous situation when we discussed about the unity of 27. It's absolutely key that we keep up the unity of 27, and we fully support Michel Barnier and his team and asked him to continue negotiations in line with our agreed positions. Let me also stress that for all the member states it's a key issue that the Irish border issue is solved. We still have no substantial progress on an operational backstop for the Irish border. Both parties agreed that we need a backstop, and without a solution we have no deal and we have no transition. It is our aim to reach a deal until October. The outcome is crucial because at the end of the day it's about the future of the people, businesses and European borders. The European Union will continue to pursue its analysis of the White Paper in line with the principles set out by the European Council. I want to thank Michel Barnier for his really intensive and utmost job, and may I hand the floor to him.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being so patient and for being here. I'd like to begin by thanking Gernot and the Austrian presidency. I'd like to wish them all the best, but I'd also like to thank them for having given us the opportunity at the beginning of their presidency to have a General Affairs Council meeting. It was a long meeting, a very intense meeting, but a very useful one for both my team and myself. Everyone had the opportunity to share their analysis, their ideas, to put questions. I often say, ladies and gentlemen, that the unity of the 27 that Gernot just referred to, unity that was confirmed today, isn't a God-given. It's a unity that is achieved by listening to each other, by listening to the institutions, to the European Parliament, as well as the Council. And for my team and myself, there is a degree of transparency and objectivity that we are going to continue applying, listening to each and every member state. So thank you very much, Austrian presidency and Gernot, for having taken this initiative. And as I said, I'd like to wish you all the best for the Austrian presidency, because you're taking over the presidency at a key moment, because it is during the Austrian presidency that we will have to reach an agreement on this negotiations with the UK, agreement on the withdrawal agreement, as well as the political declaration. There are 13 weeks left. Our aim at the moment, our main aim is to continue and conclude on the withdrawal agreement. As you know, what is in green is agreed, so 8% has already been agreed with the British. And then in parallel to this, we also, once we finalise this agreement, need to work with the UK to come up with a joint political declaration on the future relationship. Now, this morning, as Gernot requested, I shared our analysis with the 27 ministers, this at the end of a new week of negotiations and in the light of the discussions that we had yesterday with the new Brexit minister, Dominic Raab. I had a very useful and very cordial meeting with him yesterday. And as you know, a few days ago we received the UK's White Paper on the future relationship. As you know, this White Paper is the result of a very intense internal debate in the United Kingdom, a debate that was necessary. And I think we've all seen that this debate in the UK is not over yet. As I said to the ministers, there are several elements in this white paper that does open the way to a constructive discussion leading to the political declaration on our future relationship. Let me quote a few of the positive elements. The proposal for a free trade agreement, which will be at the very heart of our future economic relations. Now, basically, we have a key proposal there, that this was part of the Council guidelines, namely that we need an ambitious free trade agreement. The second element, commitments to a level playing field, especially as regards state aid and the rules on employment and environment. And thirdly, a broad convergence on the need, in fact, the absolute need to cooperate on both internal and external security. And on this point, what is actually very important and positive in the UK White Paper is the guarantees that are going to be provided for defending fundamental rights and the recognition of the role to be played by the European Court of Justice as sole arbiter. Why is that important? Because this breakthrough with the support of the UK and the European Court of Human Rights means that the exchange of data will be made easier between the UK and us, whilst protecting the fundamental rights of citizens. So this opens up the possibility of us extending our offer on internal security cooperation in particular. As to the future economic partnership, the White Paper has raised three series of issues which I put forward, and we have questions that we have put to the UK, and we await answers. Firstly, the White Paper proposals. We need to see if they are compatible with the principles set out by the 27 heads of government and state at the European Council meeting in March. In fact, even before March, when the negotiations began in June 2016. These are principles that were reiterated by the foreign ministers today. Integrity of the single market and the customs union, the indivisibility of the four freedoms, and the respect of the autonomy of the EU decision-making of the 27 member states. These are three key elements that were in the mandate of the European Council, in my mandate, and I will be scrupulously respecting them right through to the end. Of course, our main aim is to protect the EU's single market, to protect what we are at this moment in time. Let me give you one example. The UK says that they are willing to align itself on the EU standards for goods, but only for goods that are checked at the border. The UK consequently would not align itself to our agro-food rules as regards GMOs or pesticides, because the respect of these rules is not checked at the border. And this was in fact confirmed to us this week in the negotiations. So how can we protect consumers in Europe? We have a duty of care to protect consumers in the single market. And on which basis could we accept a free circulation of goods? So that is a question that we have put to the UK. A second question. Are these white paper proposals workable? Are they applicable without any additional complexity or additional bureaucracy? For example, the regulatory alignment on goods, and furthermore on what the facilitated customs arrangements as proposed by the UK. As you will have seen, these proposals would mean two tariffs would be applied, either the UK tariff or the Union tariff, or goods that are going to go to the UK market, or whether they are to go to the European market, respectively. So this creates practical problems. For example, how can the customs services verify the final destination of the goods so as to choose the correct tariff, so as to ensure that they apply the correct tariff? Is there not a major risk of fraud? What would be the financial and administrative extra costs be for businesses given this new dual system? Now, Brexit cannot and will not justify additional bureaucracy. What would the impact be if the UK has tariffs lower than the EU tariffs? What impact would it have on the finances of the member states? And such a complex system would also raise a much more fundamental question. How could the EU delegate the application of EU tariffs to a country that is no longer a member state, that is no longer subject to our rules of governance? And is it possible? Is it legally feasible? And then a third set of questions we put to the UK. Are the British proposals in the interests of the EU. As we said, our aim is to protect the interests of the EU in these negotiations. Well, by definition, the common rule book for goods would not only cover services, because the UK wants to be free to diverge on the rules for services. Now, as you know, in any product that we have, take this, your telephone, between 20 and 40% of the value of this good is linked to services. So how will we avoid unfair competition via the services? Because the UK would be free to diverge on the services. So how can we avoid unfair competition vis-à-vis EU companies? How could an autonomous British trade independence be feasible? How can we allow that? How can we avoid UK companies having a significant competitive edge vis-à-vis the EU companies? So these are the sort of questions that I put to the UK delegation.
Questions we discussed yesterday with Dominic Raab. And we will continue this discussion and look constructively at the answers we will get to our questions. But our main focus must be and will be the finalization of the withdrawal agreement. Let me recall that the withdrawal agreement is the prerequisite for an orderly withdrawal, also for the transition period, and for creating the trust that we need to build a solid partnership for the future. This requires, in particular, as you mentioned, Gernot, a legally operative backstop, an all-weather insurance policy to address the issues of Ireland and Northern Ireland, and all 27 member states insist on this. Why? Because we are committed to protecting Ireland and Northern Ireland against the consequences of Brexit and to preserve the Good Friday Agreement in all its dimensions. I said this on my last visit in Ireland and Northern Ireland a few weeks ago, where I engaged with stakeholders across both communities. Let me simply recall the commitment taken by Prime Minister Theresa May to have a backstop in her letter to President Tusk in March, and the respect of this commitment is essential. And I made clear yesterday to Dominic Raab that we are not asking for a border between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK. What we need is checks on goods, because the UK wants to leave the single market, the customs union, and our common commercial policy. We cannot afford to lose time on this issue, and this is why we have invited the UK to work on the backstop next week. We are open to any solutions, as long as they are workable and can be transformed into a legally operative text in time for the withdrawal agreement. Ladies and gentlemen, even if we want to reach a deal, it is also our responsibility to be prepared for all scenarios, including a no deal. As the European Council said, we have to step up preparation at all levels for all scenarios. And the communication adopted yesterday by the Commission should be read in this context. We are encouraging national administrations and companies to use the time we have, which is short, very short, to accelerate this preparation. Finalement, Mesdames et Messieurs, nous devons
Finally, ladies and gentlemen, we need to find an agreement on all the outstanding issues in the withdrawal agreement. This, of course, includes the issue of Ireland and Northern Ireland, that's the most serious issue, but also the British military bases in Cyprus and, obviously, Gibraltar. Now, each of these issues is important, and we need to have an agreement on each and every one of these issues. Agreement on them is necessary prior to us adopting a withdrawal agreement. They are necessary. With the UK, we need to also draw up the joint political declaration on our future relationship, this by October. Now, at this stage in the negotiations, we don't have many weeks left, but it's not a matter of needing more time. It's a matter of choosing the right decisions and being absolutely clear, because after all, we are creating an international legal treaty, so we need legal certainty and legal clarity. So the earlier we can achieve this certainty and clarity, the earlier we can start discussions on our future partnership. We want this to be as ambitious as possible, not only on trade and on the economic front, but on other areas of common interest, and also so that we can have a strategic partnership which would have an internal security aspect to it, as well as a foreign policy and defence aspect to it. Thank you very
much. We now have time for a couple of questions. Please tell us who you are and who you work for. Jennifer, please.
Thank you. It's Jennifer Rankin from The Guardian. And to Mr. Barnier, you raised a number of questions about, especially on the customs and single market aspects of the white paper. Is that a polite way of saying no to the British proposals? And can you say also how much agreement on these points you expect in the political declaration? And are you conscious of the fact that the British Prime Minister will find it difficult to sell that political declaration and to sell the withdrawal agreement unless there's sufficient detail? Is that a factor that weighs in your mind? Thank you.
D'abord, vous me trouvez toujours très poli.
First of all, you will find that I'm always very polite.
Et je peux exprimer de manière polie des questions.
I can put issues and disagreements and alerts in very, very polite terms, and I will continue to do this, because as I've been saying from the outset, in my attitude as a European negotiator, there will never be any trace of aggressiveness or a desire for revenge or anything like that, for quite a number of reasons. I work and I wish to work on behalf of the 27 and the European Parliament towards an agreement, towards an orderly withdrawal and, of course, future relations. And it's within that constructive spirit that we have read and will continue to examine the ideas which the United Kingdom has published, which is a good thing, of course, because it facilitates the discussion. I recalled a number of positive and important points in the white paper, which will be useful elements when it comes to constructing an agreement on the various chapters or points of a future political declaration on future relations. And of course, other points, that applies to the points on economic relations as well, where we've still got quite a number of questions. Questions which we're asking to be able to better understand how the UK proposals might work, for example, in customs. There are issues that we in the Commission services don't understand. It needs to be workable. Clearly, these proposals or ideas need to be fully compliant with the guidelines from the European Council, the four freedoms, the integrity of the single market. We're not going to negotiate on those, of course, because that's what the UK wishes to leave, and we need to find the best possible relations, but never to the detriment of the single market and the unity of that market.
Paddy Smith, Irish Times. You will be aware that Mrs. May has made a speech in Belfast today in which she You'll be aware that Mrs. May has made a speech in Belfast today in which she has reiterated
We're going to leave that press conference there. Michel Barnier, the chief EU negotiator, responding to the Prime Minister's white paper, says he welcomes the progress of having received it, but notes that it's still the subject of much debate within Britain. He goes on to raise many technical questions about how the proposals will work, particularly over customs and indeed the frictionless movement of goods at the Irish border. He is inviting the UK to discuss that Irish border question, the backstop, next week, and goes on to say that the country needs to step up its preparations for the event of a potential hard Brexit. He then highlights that time is of the essence. We'll be bringing you more on that story. The EU's chief negotiator has said that Theresa May's white paper on Brexit has raised many unanswered questions. Michel Barnier also described his first meeting with the new Brexit Secretary, Dominic Raab, as useful and cordial. Well, it comes as the Prime Minister has called on the EU to shift its position on the Irish border, arguing that the bloc can't keep falling back to its previous position, which she says is unworkable. Well, let's cross live now, where Michel Barnier is speaking in Brussels, and listen in.
Technically, we feel that it's workable. We can improve it further. We can work on it. We're doing that work to reply specifically to the previous question you asked. But we need an operational backstop now in the withdrawal agreement and not later.
And the last one, Thomas.
ERG-Chequers pour le journal Le Soir ici. Bonjour, Monsieur Barnier. Vous venez de...
Mr. Barnier, you've just explained what sort of questions you put on the white paper. As you said, you're always very courteous, but there are major stumbling points in the white paper. Now, the white paper is not the same, but already it's been amended this week, and we see that at the moment in Westminster there seems to be no perspective of a majority on any kind of Brexit. And then the Prime Minister, in her speech in Belfast today, said that you need to change your viewpoint on the backstop. So my question isn't actually on all of that, but my question is, given all of this, knowing that businesses are going to have to start preparing, as the Commission has warned them, when do you think should you assume your responsibility and tell economic operators and businesses that the prospect of a no deal is on the horizon? So when will that be? Is it going to be in October? Will it be the 29th of March? When will you draw this conclusion? Or as a negotiator, are you going to go right through to the end and keep negotiating right through to the end? Well, we have to be realistic. My aim is to reach an agreement. It's not going to be easy. I said that right from the very first day when I took on this job. It's an extraordinarily complex set of negotiations. And as the negotiations have panned out, we see how complex it is. And we've seen it from the House of Commons, how complex it is, leaving the EU, the customs union. So it's not only at the EU level that we've got to accept the consequences of this decision, it's also in the UK. As I mentioned, the problems with the customs union earlier on. There's no reason why European enterprises and businesses should bear the brunt of the decision to leave the EU. But my aim is to reach an agreement, which will be difficult and it will take a lot of time over the summer and after. If you look at the countdown, the UK itself set the deadline as the 29th of March. They've enshrined it in British law. It's the UK that chose this deadline, not us. They are the ones that chose the date of the 29th of March 2019. So we need some months to ratify an agreement. There's no choice. You have to have ratification by the Council of Ministers, the European Parliament, and then the British Parliament, which is sovereign. So if you count down, take away these months that are necessary for ratification, that basically means that we have to note that there is or there is not an agreement before December. We will have to take stock of the situation, and we will do our best to note that there is a withdrawal agreement, and we're not far. There's only 20% of the text that needs to be agreed. And in fact, already this week, we made some progress on certain issues. We've got Ireland still. And we are working on the basis of what was agreed in March with Theresa May. So that's the basis for our work. And we are willing and open to work on all British ideas, but the time schedule is what it is, because otherwise we have a real problem running into...
We're going to leave that press conference there, and we're going to go live now to Belfast. Our political correspondent, Tom Rayner, is there. Tom, I presume you were listening into that press conference. He started off politely, didn't he? But he's got a lot of problems, unsurprisingly, with the aspects of those Chequers proposals, that white paper that involved Northern Ireland.
That's right. He said it was a constructive, it provided a constructive basis for discussions. But for all of those Brexiteers, people like David Davis in particular, the former Brexit secretary who resigned, citing his concerns that Theresa May would be forced to make further concessions on that Chequers agreement that so many Brexiteers were already unhappy with, I think what we've just heard from Michel Barnier will reaffirm those fears. They will feel vindicated about raising those concerns, because it was came across very clearly that Michel Barnier feels that there are lots of areas in that Chequers agreement, in that white paper that the government have published, which raise major questions, amongst them whether or not it is compatible, the idea of this free trade area between the UK and the EU for goods, whether that's compatible with the single market. He said that there might be legal questions, for example, over the proposed facilitated customs arrangements that Theresa May wants. Those are the arrangements whereby the UK would collect tariffs on behalf of the EU for goods coming into the UK bound for the continent. He says, is it possible legally for the UK to be the body that receives those tariffs if it is not governed by the rules of the European Union? He talked about whether or not the bureaucracy that this would create would be justifiable when based against what he says is one of his key concerns, which is whether or not this ultimate deal will work in the interests of the European Union. He also said that there are big questions about whether this arrangement would allow the UK to undercut the EU. So quite clearly, although he framed these points as questions rather than outright saying that the white paper was not a plausible way forward, I think this is going to be received by Brexiteers as proof that Theresa May's Chequers plan is going to have to be see further changes if it's ever going to get through, and that's something they've been long worried about. He also made the point very clearly that actually before all of this, before all of the discussion on what the future relationship will be between the EU and the UK, what has to be done first is an agreement on the withdrawal process. And at the heart of that is the issue around the Irish backstop, now on the Irish border. Now, as he was saying, the EU's position is that that backstop agreement that was agreed back in December, which said that if any future relationship deal didn't allow for the maintenance of a frictionless free border, that the UK would align with EU rules and regulations. He says that has to only be Northern Ireland. So despite certain repeated calls from the Prime Minister saying that that was simply not acceptable, that that would threaten the constitutional and economic integrity of the UK, it seems, although, as you say, it was delivered quite politely, that Michel Barnier is really not blinking at this point, that the Prime Minister has still quite a big task on her hands if she thinks the EU are going to move.
Now, the Prime Minister was giving a speech, wasn't she, earlier this morning? Just remind us what she had to say.
Yeah, I mean, it's important in the context of what we've just heard from Michel Barnier, because part of why Theresa May was here in Northern Ireland was to sell that Chequers agreement, partly to people here in Northern Ireland, people who will be affected by what happens at the border. She met with political parties from across the spectrum, and she made the argument to them, but also, crucially, to those within her own party that I've talked about, those Brexiteers that have concerns about this idea of maintaining alignment in rules and regulations on goods, that her proposals in Chequers are the only way that you can, on the one hand, preserve and respect the Brexit referendum result, protect the economy, and also protect the Good Friday Agreement. And she said that this was about a practical way forward. This is what she had to say.
In leaving the European Union, as we are doing, we have a duty to ensure that the outcome we achieve works for the whole UK, including Northern Ireland. For all of us who care about our country, for all of us who want this union of nations to thrive, that duty goes to the heart of what it means to be a united kingdom and what it means to be a government. Our job is not to deal with Brexit in theory, but to make a success of it in practice for all of our people. And nowhere is the need for practical solutions more vital than here in Northern Ireland, the only place where the United Kingdom shares a land border with an EU member state that is also a co-signatory to the Belfast Agreement.
I think what's interesting in that speech, if you think about it in the context of what we just heard from Michel Barnier, is that is Theresa May using the argument of pragmatism towards those in her own party who feel that the UK would be better off with a Canada-style free trade agreement, perhaps just unilaterally not observing or putting in place checks at the border. So she was arguing to them that there needs to be practical solutions. But what we've just heard in response to that speech from Michel Barnier is the same argument being put back to her, that actually there are lots of pragmatic and practical reasons why this Chequers proposal that was so hard fought, which has already seen those cabinet resignations, doesn't necessarily work in practice for the European Union. And I think as a result of that, you see why these discussions about the possibility of no deal seem to be increasing, because there is increasing intractability on so many sides of this, on the backstop, on that withdrawal agreement, on whether or not a future relationship deal as envisioned by Chequers is plausible, whether that's in Parliament getting past Theresa May's own party, or whether it is going to ever get past the European Commission.
A lot of work still to be done. OK, Tom, thank you.